the idea behind it was that it was on this dark background and these two flowers in the middle. So it was meant to be like, well, like everything that's happened to us in our lives is like so dark and sad, but we've like kind of kept each other going. And I loved the way that that looked. And so I just kind of took off from there.
Melissa Clayton, happy to have you in today to sit down with us.
Thanks, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we've had your stuff downstairs for a little while, and that's been gone over pretty well. People seem to really dig it. I like the photographs. I like what you're doing.
Thanks.
And I'm excited to find out a little bit more about you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. I've been so honored to have my work downstairs, and it's interesting because I've been a photographer for about 20 years now, but most of my work I've kept to myself until the last like 3 or 4 years. And I've always done like little things here and there for friends. Like I remember after college, I did like 3 or 4 weddings for friends. And then I would do like when friends would start having babies, I would do like newborn shoots and things like that, pregnancy. And I've always photographed my husband, myself, and the kids, but out, and then like landscapes because we travel a lot. But I've mostly kept it to myself and shared it with my husband and not many other people. And a couple of years ago, he encouraged me to start a business. And so once that started, I started sharing more things. I started making my Instagram public. And then last year, Jenny Kelly, who's another artist on the South Shore, reached out to me on Instagram and said, I'd love to meet up with you. And so we got coffee, and we hit it off right away, and she really encouraged me to start dipping my toes into the art scene here.
Yeah, that's great. I can see like a very, obviously the subject matter
is very similar.
Very similar. She's got a little bit more colorful background than you do.
Yeah, Jenny's are much more cheerful than mine. Mine are a little morbid. But yeah, so she's the one who really encouraged me to start kind of dipping my toes in, and then I met Dina, and I think the rest just kind of took off from there.
And you had some pieces in. Did you participate in that holiday show that we did?
I did, yeah. So in that show, there's a piece of mine. I think it's 3 poppies and then a couple butterflies, and I just did like a small 5x7. And I get all my work printed at Goss Photo.
Nice.
So Sean has helped me because my work is so dark. He's helped me figure out the best way to adjust the lighting to have it
So
printed.
when you're actually shooting it, or
no, when I'm editing it.
Editing.
So what I do on my computer, because it's backlit, versus what I print, are 2 different copies. So I adjust. He told me to like how to adjust my white levels to make it better for printing. So like the copy of this on my computer is a little bit darker.
But you now like. You kind of understand how it's going to look when you print it.
Yeah. He's amazing.
He's a tremendous resource. I think that, we do a ton of work with him. There's a picture of him right to you, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think he's a super talented guy, and him and Tara are just a great resource for photographers.
Yeah, I love them. They're great.
And, I think much like myself, he's, passionate about art and, seeing the community be, filled with art and, different things. So I think it's, I'm actually excited. I wasn't aware that you used him for your printing.
Yeah, I had been doing, so I've almost always done portraiture, but it's mostly been of me and my family.
Yep.
And so whenever I would get things printed for my in-laws or my dad, I would do it through Artifact Uprising, which was good for those things, but that work is not as dark as my floral pieces. And so I started getting my floral pieces painted, and they were not coming back the way that I needed them to.
Yep.
So I asked a local friend, like, where do you go to get your things printed? And she said, you can go to Goss. And so I went in, and I didn't have super high expectations because I'd never been in before. And I've just been blown away. They've been incredible and so helpful. There was a piece that I entered in an art show at Cape Cod Art Center. And they helped me like adjust that perfectly and like kind of figure out how to print it because I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, should I put it on glass? Like, should I not frame? Like, should I not have glass in the frame. And Sean was like, no, like, you're going to, this piece needs to be framed in a very specific way. And so, yeah, they've been really helpful. And then Dina helps me frame everything here. And she always sees things in my work that I don't. So
it's nice to have somebody, that you can rely on, like having that relationship with Dina. So, especially if it's a nice, honest relationship and it's not just a cheerleader, because sometimes like you said, you don't see something or, and that can be for good or for bad, right? Like sometimes, I remember when I used to paint being like, and then someone tells me that they like it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe they're right.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's important. But you're originally from California too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up in Southern California, about 45 minutes to an hour east of LA. Mm-hmm. Both my parents immigrated here from Mexico when they were children, and they both grew up in LA and then kind of moved a little further out when we were babies. And then I went to college in Ohio, met my husband through my sister-in-law, and he was stationed in Iraq. She asked me to start writing to him. And I was like, no, I'm not. That's crazy. And then some of my girlfriends like guilted me into it, and they were like, oh, this poor sad Marine, like you should write letters to him. So we started corresponding on Facebook, and then we met, and he's originally from Michigan. So we met and fell in love really quickly, got married really fast, moved to Michigan, and then we were there for like a year. He got offered a job in Boston, and we moved out here, and we've been here ever since.
So that's what brought you into this area.
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I don't think we'll ever. We love Michigan. We're not too fond of California, but we love Michigan. I don't think we'll ever go back though. Like our plans are to buy a house up in Maine and retire.
Yeah. Well, once you have the kids too, like it kind of grounds you, and you want them to have some structure, right? Especially in those formative years.
Yeah, and they love it here. Like every time we joke about like, oh, let's move. Like we went to the Tetons last September, just the two of us, and we came back and we're like, oh, like we want to move out there, and they were like, no, we love it here. So yeah, well, I think we'll be here forever.
Maine's a good option. I'm exploring the idea of like trying to spend some time there next summer.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there.
Yeah, and it's close enough that I feel like for me, like I can get back if there's an emergency here, but it's far enough away that it's not like I can jump the gun and be like, all right, I'm going back.
Yeah, it's a nice escape.
Yeah.
Have you ever been up to Acadia?
I've been to different parts of Maine, usually near hockey rinks.
Okay, yeah.
A couple deliveries for projects up there. But I love the beauty of it. I used to ski when I was a kid, but I don't know anything. I couldn't tell you what parts of Marshfield I've been to, and I've lived there for like 20 years.
Oh, that's so funny.
So I said I think it's interesting you're from California, and Marsha originally is from California too. I didn't make that connection until I was flipping through the book earlier.
Yeah.
Because again, much like Jenny Kelly, kind of like similar subjects, flowers down there, but just done in such different ways.
Yeah. So part of why my work is so dark. So my mom died when I was younger. I was 10, and that has just had a really big influence on my life overall. And so most of my work, I think, is a little bit darker in general. Like even my portraiture is darker than other people's, but it's not as dark as these. And when I started doing still life, it was as gifts to friends.
Yep.
And it was actually the first one was to like my very best friend. I've known her my whole life. And it was meant to kind of be like, the idea behind it was that it was on this dark background and these two flowers in the middle. So it was meant to be like, well, like everything that's happened to us in our lives is like so dark and sad, but we've like kind of kept each other going. And I loved the way that looked. And so I just kind of took off from there. But it's meant to show how even in the midst of suffering and sadness, there is still beauty and there's still light to be found.
I think you can find a lot of meaning in that, right? With like, then flowers in general, right? Like they're beautiful, but they're gonna die
Exactly.
quickly.
I mean, and once you cut them, they're already dying.
Yep.
So there's a lot of symbolism in all of them for me. My cousin, who's an art major and interior designer, she always says she calls them venatas, which is they're meant to like symbolize portions of death. And then my kids joke that they're memento moris, which in the Catholic Church means to remember your own death. So everybody jokes that like, and I'm kind of morbid myself. So everybody's like, oh, these are perfect reflections of you and your soul because you're a pretty morbid person. So
I think, my mother passed when I was very young too. So maybe that's why I feel like I connect with them. But I like the presentation of them. I really think that they're done well. You can see that, all sorts of depth in there, opposed to some stuff that you can tell has been scanned on a black backdrop or and so I just feel like there's a lot of depth there. They have that like Feinstein type of feel to them. And they're staged in the old chicken coop.
So this one actually, so when I first started doing still life, I was doing them in our living room. So it's at the front of our house, and the whole room has 4 windows, and this one is between 2 of the windows. So the light you can see, I would always cover the one on the right. So the light comes in from the left when I would photograph these ones. And then some of them I would do like in our little kitchen nook area. But then when we got our house renovated, I started shooting upstairs in this weird closet, which it's like this walk-in closet, but there's never been any. We've been there for like 13 years now. There's never been any like rods for clothes. So it was just a perfect place for me. Like I painted one wall dark and started shooting there. And then when my husband moved out of that room, he gave his office up for my oldest daughter because she didn't want to share a room with her little sister anymore. I was like, well, I have to go somewhere. And we'd had this shed in the backyard that used to be a chicken coop that we drywalled during COVID. Because the kids were like, oh, we want a playhouse. And then they never used it because there was always spiders in it. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just use this.
Do you leave the spiders in there?
Yeah. I mean, I vacuum them out occasionally, but...
that would get really morbid, right?
Yeah, I would. Sometimes, like, we were gone for, like, a month over the summer, and when I came back, I was like, damn it, there's spiders in here again. So I had to go and clean everything out. But... So one wall in there is the color of our living room, and then the other is the color of what our kitchen nook used to be. And those are the majority of my backdrops. Recently, I started playing around with lighter colors. So I just got some MDF boards, and my favorite one so far has been this like really pale pink. And then I've got a purple one, and I need to finish painting the others. But between 3 kids and my husband, I haven't had time. So
do you find with like the different backdrops, does it give you like different qualities, or do you use the different ones against different flowers? What is there a formula there, or
so my favorite one is the green, and this is what this one shot up against. So the majority of my work is shot against this like really dark, it's not like a hunter green, it's like almost like a forest green. And usually, because I'm mostly drawn to like pinks and whites, everything works well against that. But occasionally when I bring things in, like my roses, for instance, I have like, I think 8 different types of roses now, but most of them are this like very bright pink. Those I like to shoot up against the blue. There's another one that I did, I think it was last winter, of these like kind of orangey tulips that somebody gave me, and I did that up against the blue because it just brought out the green in the vase and the stems and the orange in the petals. So it just depends on the flower, and when I take it into my little chicken coop, which looks better, which brings it out more. So
and then as far as the flowers go, are you just going to local florists? Do you grow own flowers?
So I
do you find a flower and you're like, wow, this is
Yeah.
This one's going to look good because of something in it, or?
Yeah. So these ones, all of them except for the center flower, are from Cross Street Flower Farm. So it depends on what I'm looking for. So usually the majority of my work is grown by me, or the majority of the flowers in my work are grown by me. I have, I think, like 12 raised garden beds in the backyard, and those are all cut flowers.
It's a job of its own.
Yeah, but it makes me really happy. And then I've got like 3 different types of hydrangeas. I've got irises that I grow, lupine, roses. I have a bunch of peony now. And so every winter I kind of decide what am I going to grow based off of what I haven't shot and what I want to try and shoot, what I want to try and grow. And then whatever I don't grow on my own, whatever I can't grow. So these other ones surrounding it are poppies. Mm-hmm. There's these bigger ones, these big white ones. Those are peony. Whatever I can't grow on my own, I typically source from local florists or local flower gardeners. So there's Cross Street Flower Farm in Norwell. There's Loon Flower Farm in Scituate. Sea Flower Farm in Pembroke. I'm trying to think of what the other one is called. She's also in Norwell. So they've all been really supportive of me, and like Loon oftentimes will give me flowers that she's just going to compost.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So like a couple weeks ago, she gave me these 2 huge buckets of like so many dahlias, and then I got them home and I was like, I have no idea what to do with all of you. There was like too many choices. So yeah, so it's a mix between like what I can't grow myself and what I can, and yeah.
I imagine it must make looking at flowers very challenging, right? Because you're trying to figure out heights and combinations.
Yeah. So I typically like this one for instance was 2 bouquets, then plus the middle is an iris that I grew, and I knew what had happened here was it was the first iris I had ever grown, and bearded irises are just like these weirdly, beautifully intricate flowers. And so I knew I wanted to photograph it, but I didn't have anything else in bloom at the time.
Yep.
So I went to Cross Street and I showed them a picture and I was like, this is the flower that I want to build around. Like, what would you suggest? And they pointed me to these Icelandic poppies, which are the pale peachy ones and then the open white ones. And then I saw the peony. So then what I do is I bring them into my studio and I'll start with whatever one I want to be the centerpiece, and I kind of build everything around that. And I'll adjust the heights based off of how I want everything to look. Mm-hmm. So I always have a pair of garden snips in there to cut everything.
Yep.
And then I usually, like, all of the pieces in this show are not in vases. They're all standing on floral frogs.
That the little, it looks like the little stem.
Yeah, so they're like, depending on the size, Cross Street has these really great ones that are a little bit bigger, but they're like little circles and they have like spikes sticking out from them, and they're metal, so they weigh down the flower. So depending on the flower, sometimes it's a little bit harder to use them because like poppies, for instance, have really, really thin stems. Mm-hmm. So they're a little bit more fragile. Are
those just for shooting, like taking pictures of flowers, or is there?
You can use them to arrange them like in bouquets as well. Like you can put them in the bottom of vases. I don't know that they're actually intended for what I do because the flowers are out of water for so long.
Yep.
Surprisingly, though, they do well. Like it usually takes me like 30 or 45 minutes to just compose it, and then going in and shooting is another length of time.
How often do you get 30, 45 minutes without somebody knocking on the door?
Never. There's always somebody being like, Mom! And now that I'm in the old chicken coop, I like keep the door closed to get the kind of light that I want. Yep. And I would say like 90% of the time somebody, because I do long exposures, which is part of how I get the light and the dark married so well. somebody will open it like right in the middle of my like 30-second exposure. I'm like, you're not supposed to open the door. I need to like put a big sign on it that's like, don't disturb mom. So yeah, so it just depends on, like I said, what I have and what I don't have. And then I'll go to the flower farms and
I think that's, I like the whole community aspect too. And I think that's, pretty cool to hear that the people at the flower farms are excited to be a part of it and like consult with you almost about the, what's going to look good. And I think that's cool and like an important relationship to build.
Yeah, I think it's just such a good example of women supporting women. And I've been so appreciative of everything that they've provided for me. So I think there's only a handful of pieces downstairs that are not from local flower farmers. And usually after I shoot something from another farmer, I'll send them like 5x7s of the pieces. For free, just because I feel like it's it's out of my gratitude for them growing and helping me. So yeah, it's a really really beautiful relationship, and I'm really appreciative of all they do. So
yeah, I think it's cool. I mean, being like someone that's trying to be a part of art, it's nice to see other people like in different aspects kind of like bringing what they do into the that whole creative process. And then to hear that they're like just we got a bunch of flowers, let's give them to Melissa.
So Jenna at Loon has been like really awesome about that. Like there's a piece downstairs, it's these anemones, but they grew really long and the stems are really windy. It's purple, it's got like purple and white and it looks really odd because of the way that they're interacting with each other. And she was like, I would never sell these, but they're just going to go in my compost bin. And I was like, I absolutely want those because of how weird the stems are. And there's just so much poetry within that, the way that they move. So yeah, a lot of those pieces wouldn't exist without the generosity of these flower farmers.
Then do you show any of your work at some of their places too?
I don't. That's not something that's crossed my mind. I know, so 3 of them, it's basically out of their homes. Cross Street has more of like a barn shop, but it's not something I've ever, but it's not something I've ever approached them about. So.
I guess I'm thinking of like some of those like more garden center-y type of places, but flower farms. I haven't been to too many flower farms.
Yeah, Cross Street has like a really great barn shop, and they have like they sell like they've got like a kids section, and they've got like floral books, and they've got vases and like flower tools and like lots of things there. So she definitely has space for it, but. Yeah, everybody else is more out of their homes. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think that their customer base probably likes flowers.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Yeah, maybe maybe they like a more cheery flower, but
my stuff might be too dark. Well, and it's funny, like I joke with my husband that like when he encouraged me to start a business, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I know what to do with the camera, but I'm not a good business person. So he's constantly like he's the business behind.
Yeah, well, you need support. You need a team behind you when you're doing this, and nobody knows what they're doing when they start.
That's what he reminds me of. But it's funny because friends will be like, "Oh, have you thought of like I had a friend recently who was like, you should like do birth flowers, like because there's flowers associated with every month that people are born.
Yeah, flower of the month. They used to be like a huge thing with the prints back in the day.
So they're like, oh, you should do that, or like you should. One of my friends, she asked me when she got married if I would photograph her bouquet, but like after her wedding, she wanted me to like take it apart and do whatever I wanted with it. And originally I was like, yeah, I'll absolutely do that. And then I brought it home and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is such a sacred part of your story. That I was terrified of it. But then I did it, and she loved it.
Yep.
So she's like, you should offer that as a service as well. And I'm like, I don't know, that scares me. Versus like when it's a friend asking you to do something. It's
that's
different.
a tough one, right? I mean, probably like much like being a wedding photographer, you get one shot at it.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that they are happy with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Weddings are too much pressure for me. I don't think I'll ever do that again.
Yeah. And now I was reading about when you post them in Instagram, like you write a little bit of a story behind them too?
Yeah, usually, so because I'm usually by myself when my kids leave me alone, and I listen to music when I shoot, it's very much a spiritual thing for me. And so oftentimes when I'm photographing, like things will come out that I don't necessarily intend to put there.
Yep.
And it just, I'm a very like introspective, like overly emotional person. And so then when I go to share it, it's like, well, this means so much more than it originally did. And I oftentimes can't just share a piece without sharing that other piece of my heart because they're so closely intertwined. So yeah, I do share a lot of what they mean to me.
Yep.
Because, like I said, they're both. It is such a huge piece of my heart.
Yeah, I've scrolled through the Instagram, but I'm not. Reading isn't my strong suit, so I haven't stopped to read the whole story behind it. But I'm gonna revisit that and kind of see that, because seeing the artists or photographers, perspective on what it is interesting to me. So
yeah, well, and some of them are
wondering if it'll change my perspective of what I see when
Yeah, it might. It's funny because I didn't originally start doing that when I opened my Instagram publicly. I had removed a bunch of them because
too personal, or
yeah. So a lot of them have to do with my mom, and I mean, I think, as you know, I think with grief, I think there's this thinking that you'll at some point get over the loss of something, that you'll at some point, or the loss of someone, that you'll at some point move on.
Yep.
And I was 10 when my mom died. In December of this year, it'll be 30 years. And it continues to be something new almost every year, especially as my kids get older and they surpass the age I was when my mom died. Or even we went camping with my dad this summer, and my sister's been married for less time than me, and my dad made some kind of comment about oh, you guys should listen to me because I was married for 14 years. And there was something about the way that his words hit me, and I realized my husband and I have been married longer than my dad and my mom were married. And so it's this constant unfolding of something that I thought I've come to know because it's been with me for longer than my mother was.
Yep.
And so that's a lot of what I share, which is so deeply personal. But as time has gone on, I've been more open about that because I think of the little girl who didn't have somebody who knew what grief was, who, I remember there were people who surrounded me who often said you have to get over this. It's been X number of years. Why are you still upset? Why are you still so sad? And so that's who I think of when I share a lot of these things.
Have you seen that Empower Her group?
No.
Yeah, we did a show with them. It's a group that was funded based on children who lost, our girls that have lost their mother.
Okay. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, we did a show with them here, with a pastel group, and and that was they were, I think there was Painters with a Purpose or something like that, and that was, there was connections, and that there was a reason they wanted to use that group. But it seems like a great organization. I had a friend who had has a fashion store, and she had done a thing with them. That's what brought my attention to the group. But I think they're based out of Cohasset. It's a pretty big thing. But it
I'll have to look into that. That sounds really beautiful.
I think just seeing your passion about that, you might want to look into that group.
Yeah, for sure. So there's that I share, and then we also have struggled with fertility our whole marriage, and so that and alongside that, I have a chronic illness that they both go together, and so it's been a lot of chronic pain. And And so those are the two things that I share most about.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that like those things are really personal, but I think back to like we were married very young, and we're pretty Catholic. We're pretty devoutly Catholic. And so like I remember like all of our friends were like got married after us, and we were just having like babies upon babies, and we were like we hadn't had any.
Yeah.
And so I think back to like that young woman who felt quite alone, and so that's why I share the things that I do is for people who are like me when I was a little girl. And
it's beautiful. I mean, I think that's nice, and I think to be a successful artist or photographer or artist, and I think opening yourself up and like kind of exposing yourself, is important, and you have to kind of get used to that.
Yeah.
It gets easier, right?
Yeah, I hope so. But yeah, sometimes when I post things, I have a pit in my stomach of like, oh no, like, is this too much or is this too personal? But
do you get a good response from?
I do. A lot of people have either they'll reach out in the comments or they'll DM me and they'll just be like, this touched me in such a way, and I'm mourning this person, or I'm struggling with fertility too, and like, thank you so much. It's just so nice to know that I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that push me to continue to share.
That's so. Do you sell a lot of? Does the Instagram account generate?
For a little bit. I don't sell an awful lot of prints actually. I'm not really good at marketing myself, but. I remind myself that things take time, and, it's only been, I think it's been like 2 or 3 years since I opened my business.
Yep.
So, for as much as I've been able to do, it's definitely bigger than I ever imagined.
Yep.
So I'm just grateful that anybody wants to see it.
Yeah, and there's more than just the flowers too, right? Because you're doing portrait work.
I do portrait work. So I do family photography. Usually this is my busiest time of year. So I have about 10 repeat clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to keep that pretty small because family photography outside of my own family overwhelms me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Why?
I'm more of like a documentary style photographer.
Sure.
And so I don't really like doing like posed things.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays that's what a lot of people are looking for. A lot of people are looking for like those like beautiful Instagrammable things.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what things look like. It matters what they look like
on social media. Yeah. Versus like the pictures that I take of my kids. Like Dina and I are gonna do like a gallery wall in my house of just the portraits of my children. And so my husband and I have been going through and like narrowing down these like thousands of photos and picking our favorite ones. And they're all different. None of them are posed. But I think of this one of my middle daughter, and she's got short hair and she looks like a wild kid. She's in the backyard in August and she's wearing a leotard because she's a ballerina.
Yep.
And snow boots. And she's got like a fishing rod in her hand and she's covered in dirt. And like, it's one of the most beautiful pictures of my daughter that I've ever taken. Mm-hmm. Or like yesterday I was taking pictures of my son and his dog, and like they're like laying in his dirty dog bed together, just cuddling. But like those are the things that, like, my portraiture is inspired because my mom died when I was young but didn't like having her picture taken. Yep. So there's like, I can fill one photo album with the pictures of my mom and of 38 years. And so I've always been quite inspired to just document life. Yep. But like, those are the things that your kids are going to look back on and remember, not like the time that you force them to dress super nice and go to the beach and smile for some stranger. Yeah. So it's like these 10 families that I've gotten to know and know well, like know my style, and they appreciate that, and that's what they're looking for. But not everybody is looking for that. And so it's like nerve-wracking when new people reach out to me because I'm like, oh gosh, are you going to like this, or are you going to wonder if I was overpriced because I didn't get specific things? Yeah. So so that's why it's just kind of like, ugh. Like, but for people who I know well, it just comes quite naturally to me. So yeah.
I think that you can usually pick up on if a photograph was taken by somebody that there's a
Yeah.
They sometimes they just feel very stiff if there isn't much chemistry between the photographer and the subjects. Right?
Exactly.
So that's important. You do some landscape work too.
I do. So I got involved in photography because I was required to take an art class in order to graduate from college.
What were you studying?
Mental health and human services. I was like, why the hell do I need to, this is stupid. Why do I need to know this?
Art plays a big part in that.
I know. And at the time, I just didn't, I assumed my sister was the artist in our family.
Yep.
But she's extremely gifted musician. I think she plays 10 different instruments, and most of them are self-taught. She's also a very gifted singer. So I just assumed God doesn't give with two hands, and in our family he gave it to my sister. So I knew I couldn't draw, and I knew I couldn't paint, and there was a photography class, and there was an old film camera at our house. So I said, I'll take that. I'll fulfill my requirement. I'll probably pass with a C because I didn't think that I had any artistic bones in my body. And then I just absolutely fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. And my dad and my uncle were both photographers. Well, my uncle still is. My dad doesn't really shoot very much anymore. So my dad would come across my notebook where all of my work was, and he was like, why aren't you sharing this with anybody? Mm-hmm. And he told me, he was like, I'll take you to Joshua Tree and Yosemite. I'll take you to these places to go and shoot more. And we grew up going to them anyways, but he's like, let's just spend. So he would drive me 2 hours to Joshua Tree to spend the day out just shooting. So he's always been one of my biggest supporters. So that's how I started photographing, but I've always loved photography because there weren't many pictures of my mother.
Yep.
And then somewhere along the way, my love and my talent just met, and
it's awesome,
Yeah.
And there'll be. It sounds like there's going to be plenty of pictures of the family and the kids to look. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the flowers a favorite of yours? Is that why you I'm seeing more of those, or you just haven't opened up with the landscapes yet, or
the landscapes
are those too specific to certain areas?
No, well, they are specific to California. Mm-hmm. The landscapes are a little bit more personal, mm-hmm. Because the majority of them are from Joshua Tree and mm-hmm. Yosemite, and so my dad is an avid outdoorsman. Mm-hmm. So we grew up camping and backpacking. I've been to most of the national parks in California, and those are the places that I remember my mom the most. Mm-hmm. And when I remember her in those places, she died of breast cancer. It was mm-hmm. a really long battle with breast cancer. When I think of those times, I don't think of her sick. So they're mm-hmm. almost these sacred places for me.
Yep.
And so I do share some of them, but not as openly as I share these. Mm-hmm. I think because these are more mine, if that makes sense. This is a completely original thing. Nobody else really has their hand in it.
Yep.
Versus the landscape just holds so much more meaning to me. Mm-hmm. My dad, I think, is my biggest landscape collector. He's got these 2 huge Yosemite ones in his house, and they're not even my favorite ones, but they're his favorite.
Yep.
So I printed them off for him, and he's got them right when you walk into his house.
That's nice. What's he think of the flowers?
He likes them. I don't think he understands this part of me. Mm-hmm. So he'll be like, "Oh, that's really beautiful," but I don't think he likes.
You're not buying it.
Yeah, he doesn't. I don't think he likes them as much as my landscape work. When we went camping with him this summer, we went to Mammoth Lakes and then Yosemite, which are not too far from each other. They're about 2 hours. And so it took me several weeks to finally go through and edit those. And when I did, I put them all in a gallery and I sent them to him. And he was just like, wow, Melissa, these are incredible. So, but he never says that about my still life work. He's never like, oh my gosh, my mind is blown.
Yep.
But he's also, my dad is not a super flowery type of person, so that's probably part of why as well.
I'm not a super flowery type of guy myself, you know, and I can appreciate all things. I mean, I like Marsha's work. I mean, it's been received well. I feel like, you know, the darkness, and, you know, maybe it's because of a similar upbringing, you know, with like a, you know, loss. You know, I when I see yours with the dark background, it just, you know, gets the head spinning, and you know, like seeing that little bit more meaning. You know, and again, like Marsha, her stuff is in, you know, like Children's Hospital, and it's like, you know, with a purpose. It's uplifting people, and that's nice. But sometimes that's not the story you want, you know, or you relate to, right?
Yeah, well, and I love her work too. I mean, even like Jenny's work is very bright, and that speaks to me as well. So, I mean, I think that's the job of a good artist, right? To speak across experiences. But yeah, sometimes I wonder with these if my dad picks up on the mourning that's intertwined with them, and maybe it's a little bit too much for him.
Yeah, that would make sense. I think this one's kind of cool. I like the antique frames with them too. I think that's a great look.
That was Dina's idea, actually. She was like, you know, antique frames would actually complement your work really well, and I was like, done, Dina, because I love antiquing.
Yeah, I mean, some of the gold ones look nice downstairs too, but I don't know, like these big ones, you know, even adds like another element too. Like you're looking at the piece, you're looking at like flowers that you're arranging with your hands, then you're shooting them, and then to even go another step and like be like, all right, well, here's this like recycled frame that's kind of like coming back, you know, you're bringing it back to life in a sense.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way. I liked the idea of it because my mom used to antique when I was younger, and we would go with her, and so it's a fond memory of mine.
The story keeps getting better.
Yeah, and so I bring my oldest daughter with me, who really loves antiquing, and anything that ties her to Grandma Martha just like lights her up. So she helped me pick a lot of these frames. So it's nice to have all of those layers in my work.
Yeah, you're gonna end up like with a pile of antique frames too that are the right fit.
Yeah, it's funny because people will give me flowers. Like every time people come over for dinner, they'll go and they'll buy me bouquets of flowers because they know that I'll photograph them. And recently, people have been bringing me old frames. They'll be like, "Oh, so and so was going to throw this out. Like, here you go."
Yeah, we get a whole pile. We throw out. We started screwing them to the trees down there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just because I mean, people bring in an old frame. You know, some of them aren't like nice. Ones that could be really repurposed. They're just things that have gone out of style, or they're a corner's fallen off. They can't be fixed. So. It makes me sad to throw them in the trash and waste them. So at least they live a little bit longer on the trees.
Yeah.
And kind of makes the place, I don't know, an outside frame forest is what we're going for.
Well, I mean, and I think it's beautiful too to keep that, because then I think you're drawing people's attention to the beautiful world that's around us that I think oftentimes we just pass by.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thrilled you stopped by.
I'm glad, thanks for having me.
I feel like it was very informative for me. I love your stuff. I'm excited that we have it downstairs. Hopefully, we keep moving some more of the pieces, and people can go check out your stuff. What's the Instagram?
It's Melissa Diane.
Melissa Diane?
Yeah.
And then, and Jade's got you set up with an artist page now, too. Right?
Yeah.
And Jade and Claude have that. We get the book. People can pop in, flip through, get the stories behind some of it. And I'm thrilled you came by, and look forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor.